What you see here is a cartoon animation, and I wanted to point your interest to how the stuttering motion gives aesthetics to cartoon animation. You see, when she moves the arm left and right, up and down, it's not fluent, it's like a stuttering. It's tuck, 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 like this. And it has to do with the amount of in-between frames the drawing artist, the cartoon artist, wants to draw. So we have not too many arm rotations here as single pictures. Instead it does an in-between, well, it leaves out certain things, and computer animation in Maya is totally fluent. And that's the difference, and let's try to achieve this effect here, like a stuttering effect with which resembles the aesthetics of cartoon animation. You see the character stutters, as opposed to a fluent motion. How do we achieve this? There are several ways. One would be to create a fluent animation like we are used to do it in Maya, and then delete the rendered every, say, second keyframe, and duplicate the remaining keyframes. If we just delete keyframes, the animation would go much faster, and we animate things in a way where they are in real time, how we feel they should be. So if you delete keyframes from the rendered files, the animation will be too fast. So you have to insert keyframes again, which makes the whole process a little bit tedious. So I'll introduce ways to get rid of keyframes in a different way, and we use the graph editor, which we haven't, I think, looked too deeply into in the past tutorials. So let's start with a new scene now. So here is Maya, and we will create a character animation, and instead of really creating it from scratch, we use the general editor and the content browser. And here you have under examples and animation, motion capture data. It might be in a different folder on your computer. If it doesn't turn up at all, just check a previous tutorial I did where I explain how to import such things here. The description below. Let's go to the walk number 1. I left mouse button, move it to the modeling window, and here it is. We can close this window now. It's a walk skin, that's the skin of our character, and the reference is basically the skeleton with the animation, the motion capturing data. Motion capturing, by the way, means that a real actor or a real person fitted with contacts and lots of censoring equipment around him or her is walking, and the data are moved into computer animation software like Maya, for example, and here we see a real person's walk applied to an artificial character. Where is it? We press play, and I think we've seen this before. We don't see anything. We have to zoom out, and here is the character. We currently selected the skin. We cannot do anything with the skin. The skin is totally dependent on the bones, which are basically the joints which are inside of the character, which are here. So since it's tremendously big, let's pick the reference object and scale it down. And what I can do here is I select all 3 of them and type in, for example, 0.1. which makes the skeleton, the whole character, much smaller. Now, in order to have a cartoonish look, let's go to the window which is called side here, and here we have him walk. This is a very relaxed walk from left to right, and if we analyze our character a little bit, the skin has no animation frames. There are no red lines here in the timeline. And when we select reference, there are no red lines either. And under reference, if you press the Shift key while opening this, the whole hierarchy will open, and you see the hips. Now only the hips are selected, have keyframes. Basically every frame holds a keyframe, which is typical for motion capturing data. Too many, really. We can abandon several and still the animation will stay the same. But let's not dive too deeply into that. You see the spine 4, for example, has keyframes as well at every frame in the animation. So let's just select all of them, all the joints of that character. Some don't have animation channels, like the toes end. The end of the toes don't need keyframes, but we won't care about this. Now let's switch to Maya animation here in the workspace. It opens a double view. Here is the ordinary animation with a fluent motion. It's very, very fluent. And that's what we want to get rid of. We want to make him move in a stuttering way, which resembles the cartoon animation. So in order to do this, we need to have a look at how the keyframes behave. And here you have, for example, the translation in X and translation in Y of the hips, and different lines here, complex. Let's not dive into the complexity of this scene, but instead do what we want to do, and we select all of them. Actually, they are selected already since we selected them here, and we will, let me zoom in just very detailed. For example, here, this view, it's just a random view here. The lines go fluently from one frame to another. Very smooth. That's what makes the animation of our character so smooth. In order to make it more stepping, we introduce steps. So the tangents, that's the way the keyframes move or are pointing to the next keyframe, is interpreted. The step tangents, you see, it will introduce steps. Still, our motion of the character is very fluent. And that's, of course, because we have still keyframes at every frame. So it doesn't matter if we have fluent tangents or step tangents. And what we need to do now is get rid of certain keyframes, quite a bunch of keyframes, and we have the step tangents in between. Let's do this, for example. Let's delete this bunch of about 7 frame keyframes. Here you see we have steps now. Let's do the same here, and let's do it again here. I'm pressing delete. I'm selecting a whole bunch of, just more or less randomly, so I delete them here, and this is up to from frame 1 to frame 45. Let's go a little bit further, like here and here, so up to frame 65, and from 65 or 66 it goes on normally. So let's play back the animation now. Now you have the stuttering motion, and then the character walks in a normal way. Of course, if you don't delete that many keyframes in between, the stuttering would be less. You could delete that many keyframes only for the hip movement, for example, but leave the arm and legs animation basically the same, or remove fewer keyframes. But still, this is the stuttering effect which we have in cartoon animation. It's a very basic thing about the graph editor, and in the graph editor you just have to rely on the stepped tangents, which just remove the fluent, the wonderful flowing in-betweening, which we know from 3D computer animation.